So when we think about this flood account, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? What's the first thing that hits your mind when you think about this entire flood account? Probably Noah, right? Noah and his family. The animals, right? The 2 by 2 by 2 coming in. Is it the rain, the flood waters, and all that? There's an image or a piece of this story that is so easily missed if we just blink. But I can tell from the way that God writes this word in Genesis, it's a piece that we need to pay attention to. And it's the door. It's the door of the ark. I want us to imagine that you are Noah, right? And you're standing there in the doorway of the ark. This ark that you have built at the command of God. You have an idea that something's coming and He's been preparing you for it. You're standing there in the doorway as you watch the sky above do something you've not seen before. Turn that gray-green color. It's the kind of sight that makes you feel very unsettled about what's happening. And the winds begin to shift. The air suddenly feels very heavy. Behind you in the ark, as you stand in the doorway, are all the animals, and they're becoming restless as they sense something coming. And your family behind you as well, you can sense the anxiety within them. In front of you is this door. Solid wood. You know how solid because you made it. Heavy. Heavy in a way that feels permanent. What lies ahead of you as you stand in the doorway, unknown days. Crowded space in the ark. Darkness. That musty air. Can you imagine the smell of that ark during all that? And a lot of waiting. And then Genesis chapter 7 verse 16 gives us a quiet little detail. A detail we could miss so easily, but God says, don't miss this. The Lord shut him in. It's an important moment. The Lord closes the door. Not Noah. Noah doesn't pull and yank the door closed because of what's happening outside. He doesn't do it in a panic. Doesn't do it out of fear of looking for safety. No, the Lord shuts him in. And that little quiet detail tells us something about the character and the nature of God before one drop of rain falls. And it's this. The first merciful moment of this entire account is not the rain stopping or the waters receding. It's that God places his covenant people inside of his protection. And this is a truth that I hope that today we capture and discover for ourselves when we consider the nature of God and us as his covenant people. And it's this, and it's a refrain I'll say a few times. When the storms of our lives and the waters rise around us, know this: God's promise is already wrapped around you. When life starts to feel unstable, and it does, right? Each and every day, that's what the world does. Instability. And when it happens and the symbolic water line starts to creep up around the edges of our lives, what do we do? What do you do when all that begins to creep up around you? I tell you what I think we often do is we try to build our own arks. Not out of wood. We build our own arks out of whatever we think might be able to hold our lives together and make us feel a little bit whole. Sometimes this is me for sure, we build our arcs out of control and planning, right? We think if I can just manage every single detail, if I've got it all mapped out just right, and I anticipate every single outcome, I make all just the right decisions, I'll be able to keep the chaos outside. Sometimes we build the ark out of busyness, right? If I stay busy enough, if I accomplish enough, if I'm moving fast enough, forward, I won't have to deal with the pain and the anxiety of the stuff that's happening. Sometimes we build the ark out of comfort. We numb ourselves with whatever we can bring into our lives. If I just make things more comfortable for me, make things a little bit more numb through substances. Maybe if I just have all of the right things around me, I can drown out the stuff that's actually really happening. I can numb myself from it. And here's what I want you to hear this very clearly. This is important. There's nothing wrong with control and planning. Control maybe sometimes, but planning, right? Nothing wrong with being busy and moving forward. Nothing wrong with having comfort and rest. There's nothing evil in and of those things themselves. However, they make terrible saviors. They make terrible saviors. We cannot build anything strong enough to save ourselves from the inevitable suffering that that's already happening or that will inevitably come. And that's uncomfortable. That's really uncomfortable. And it demands this. It demands that we turn our attention to the one who does keep us. Again, when the waters of life, when the storms of life and the waters rise around the edges of our life, God's promise is already wrapped around you. It's already wrapped around you. Let's go back inside the ark with Noah. Go back inside the ark where Noah again, and just listen. What did he hear? Right? Rain is just rain, right? It's just rain when it starts, and in the beginning, it can be comforting. Like, I don't know about you, I kind of like I'll go sit out on the back porch in the midst of the rain, and it's kind of comforting. But then it gets louder and louder and louder, and persistent and constant, right? We know, we've been around, right? You've been around when rain happens for a day and maybe even goes into 24 or 48 hours. And at that point, we start to get a little uncomfortable, right? This is a lot. And you're Noah, and all you're hearing is rain, 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 constant, constant. It drowns out every other sound. It's all you hear. You're going crazy with it. And then the ground disappears. And the ark that you're in lifts, and this is something new. Now you're unstable, and you're just along for the ride now. This is uncomfortable. And here's the thing about this moment. Genesis, God makes sure that we understand this is not just a random storm that's happening. This is judgment. This is judgment happening. Genesis chapter 6 reveals this reality to us. It wasn't part of our reading, but hear these words. The preface of all of this flood event. Genesis chapter 6 says, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in all the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, and the Lord regretted that he had made man." This isn't just some random storm. This is judgment. Through the flood, God determines to blot out man. Get rid of the evil, corrupt sin that entered and destroyed his creation. This is judgment. And then the greatest word in Scripture, but Noah found favor with God. And so while God delivers judgment in this moment, and judgment is happening, and Noah's having to endure it, yes. But the reality is, God doesn't abandon, right? He doesn't abandon his promise, his covenant to his people. Because while the waters rise, God is still preserving a future. God is preserving his promise. So the truth is this, even when God confronts sin, he's always still moving toward mercy. This is the nature of who he is. And you know the hardest part of the flood? It's not day 1. It's day 12. And day 30. And day 40-something, right? When you wake up and it's still happening, all you hear is water, 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 right? And you get to the point where you're so insane over this, you're at, when will it end? Will it end? Can you imagine? Because inside the ark, you got zero control. No control whatsoever. Can't see where you're going. All you feel is uncomfortable. But you're being carried. You're being carried. But that's uncomfortable for us because we like to say, here's the plan. Here's when this will be over. Right? But the long night is where God teaches us a critical truth. You are not saved by control. You are not saved by planning. You are not saved by comfort. You're not saved by your own strength. And you're not saved by your own understanding of how everything unfolds. You are saved because you are held. And some of you are living that right now. Some of you are living that right now. You're in that long night. You're in that night of grief that just won't leave. Or you're the person that wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You ever do that? You wake up and it's like, 2 o'clock on the dot. Like your brain just says, it's 2 o'clock, and I need your brain to start scrambling in fear over all the things that are coming. Maybe that's the long night for you. Or you've got the diagnosis that rewrote the story you thought your life was going to tell. The situation you cannot fix with any effort, with any intelligence, no matter how disciplined you are. And there's this truth as well in the long night. You thought it'd be over by now. You thought the healing would have happened. You thought everything would be different by now. And instead, you're still here. You're still in the midst of it. And sometimes when we find ourselves in that moment, and if you found yourself in that moment, faith feels weak. Or life just looks like this. Just taking the next breath. Just taking the next breath and not giving up. And here's what I want you to know. If that's you, if faith feels weak and you're just taking the next breath to not let go, I need you to know that's okay. That is okay. God is not disappointed if you're tired. God is not disappointed if you're feeling weak in faith, because he's already holding you in his promise. When the waters and storms of life rise around you, God's promise is already wrapped around you. He's got you. And the reason why we know this is because this flood story is not just a simple story about waters and flood. It's about rescue from judgment. Rescue from eternal judgment. And it was all pointing forward, moving forward to something God had planned greater for us. The fulfillment of his covenant promise in Jesus. This is about rescue through the ultimate fulfillment in Jesus, who stepped into the Jordan River, not because he needed cleansing, but because we do. And then he walked out of that water in the Jordan, and he walked into the wilderness, into temptation, into isolation, not because he had to do it, but because we needed him to do it for us. And then he stepped even more fully into the long night of suffering and death on a cross, because the deepest flood was never water, it was sin and death and separation from God. And Jesus walked straight into it to do for you what you cannot do for yourself, to save you from the long night of judgment. By taking the judgment that we deserve, and he placed it on himself. And this is why our baptism is so important. This is why baptism matters. Because baptism is not about how serious you are about God. Baptism shows how serious God is about you. Because in baptism, you are united with Jesus in his death and in his resurrection. In baptism, God speaks your name. God claims you as his own. And God binds you in his eternal promise. So when life feels unstable, I need you to remember this. Baptism is not your grip on God. Baptism is God's grip wrapped around you forever. And that is so comforting. I'll tell you what, it certainly is for my family. I can't tell you how much peace and comfort comes to our family when we think about Tristan, right? And when you're a family with a special needs kid, that dude has this much faith, right? When God says faith of a mustard seed, that's Tristan, right? He can't cling to anything in faith. He's weak as can be, right? He doesn't have a grip on God. He can't. And that's okay. Because God's got his grip on Tristan through the waters of baptism. And that changes everything about how we face the storms of life. And it changes everything about how you face the storms of life or the long nights. We go back to the ark though, right? And that water did subside. It did finally go, right? The ark finally came upon land. That door thrust open. And there's Noah, right, standing at the doorway again, seeing a different scene. But it's still probably wet. It's still messy. And the world's going to remain that way. Because sin walked off of that boat with Noah. And notice when Noah and the family, and they all step off, God doesn't go, "Great job! You survived. Well done." Now, God speaks promise. God speaks covenant. And that bow is a reminder of the baptismal promise that is ours as well. I am eternally your God, he says, and you are eternally my children. And so in baptism, God's covenant promise was spoken and given to you. You are his child now and always. He is before you. He is behind you. He is beside you, all around you, within you. No matter the storms of life, you are wrapped in his promise. So here's your challenge. Where in your life right now do you most need to stop trying to stay afloat and let yourself be carried by God, the one who promise is already wrapped around you. I'll ask it again. Where in your life right now do you most need to stop trying to stay afloat and instead just let yourself be carried by the God whose promise is already wrapped around you?